They say silence is golden, but that day in my father's backyard, silence was the sound of a door slamming shut on everything I'd ever tried to rebuild. The smell of charcoal and overcooked ribs hung in the air. Kids were running through sprinklers, and someone's Bluetooth speaker played 90s country hits with too much static. From a distance, it probably looked like a perfect family reunion. Laughter, checkered tablecloths, lemonade, sweating in plastic pitchers. But from where I stood halfway between the garden hose and the folding chair my daughter had just been shooed away from, it felt like a trap I'd walked into without reading the sign. My daughter Emily, 8 and too brave for her own good, had just tried to sit next to my father. He didn't yell. He never did. He just gave that tight, practiced smile of his and said, "Sweetheart, why don't you go find your brother?" She looked confused, then disappointed. But she nodded and ran back toward Ben, her 6-year-old little whirlwind of a brother who was too busy poking holes in the dirt with a plastic fork to notice much of anything. I stepped forward out of habit. "She just wanted to sit down, Dad." He didn't look at me at first, just reached for his beer and watched the grill like it might offer him a reason not to speak. But then he sighed, one of those long, tired exhales that always came before something he thought sounded wise. "We can't keep pretending anymore, Natalie." My stomach tensed. Pretending what I ask already, knowing I'd regret it. He turned, then really looked at me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a flicker of warmth or memory or even awkward affection, just resolve. This isn't their home. Those kids, they don't belong here. The air left my lungs before I could even form a reply. He went on like he hadn't just broken something. "You made your choices. You walked out on a marriage, on a proper life. You want to live that way, fine. But don't bring them here expecting us to play along." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked past him at the yard, where my son was now spinning in circles, and my daughter was hugging her knees alone on a patch of grass. And right then, something in me shut off, or maybe it turned on. Because in that moment, I knew we were never coming back. The first cut didn't come from my father's words. It came years earlier in a living room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and disapproval. I was 24 when I told them I was pregnant. Not married, not settled, just 2 pink lines on a stick and a pit in my stomach that felt like it might never leave. I sat on the floral couch in their Lexington home, the same one I used to curl up on after church with a juice box and Sunday comics. But that day, my knees stuck to the vinyl trim, and I couldn't find anywhere to rest my hands that didn't feel like a crime scene. My mother said nothing at first, just folded her dish towel 3 times before setting it down. My father didn't look at me. "Is he going to marry you?" he finally asked. "No," I said. Silence. I tried to smile to soften it, but I'm going to keep the baby. He blinked once, then looked at me like I had just confessed to arson. "I didn't raise you to be foolish. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even cruelty. It was colder than that disappointment delivered like a verdict. No shouting, no slammed doors, just the quiet dismantling of what had once been unconditional. From that day on, I stopped being their daughter in the way that counted. They didn't disown me outright. That would have taken too much passion. Instead, they trimmed me from the edges of their lives like a frayed thread. They still invited me to birthdays, but only the big ones. They sent Christmas cards, but never addressed to Natalie, Emily, and Ben. Just Natalie, my name singular, as if the children didn't exist. When Emily was born, I called my mother from the hospital. She said she was glad things went safely and asked if I'd remembered to send thank you notes to the nurses. When Ben came along 2 years later, no one came to visit, not even flowers. Still, I tried. I showed up at Thanksgiving with homemade pies and 2 toddlers in matching sweaters. I brought framed photos for the mantle. I taught my kids to say please and thank you and yes sir and no ma'am, hoping manners might earn what love hadn't. But every attempt was met with the same frozen curtsy smiles that didn't reach their eyes, questions that never ventured beyond school grades or allergies. I thought time might thaw something. But I was wrong. What I mistook for progress was just polite delay. They weren't waiting to welcome us. They were waiting for us to give up and go away. And part of me slowly was starting to agree with them. Until that day in the backyard. That day the cut wasn't silent anymore. They always smiled for the pictures. Every Easter, every 4th of July. Every birthday with a Costco sheet cake and paper plates that said "Bless this mess," we'd line up on the porch like a department store display. Grandpa in the center, grandkids by height order, adults flanking like sentinels. I'd hold Emily or Ben on my hip, paste on my best everything's fine grin, and wait for the click. And when it was over, we'd all go back to pretending. Pretending my kids didn't notice they were the only ones never asked to stay overnight. Pretending no one realized there were framed photos of every other grandchild on the hallway wall except them. Pretending I didn't see my father tense every time Ben called him Grandpa. Like he wasn't sure he had the right. Ben didn't notice. He was 6 and more interested in grilled cheese than the subtext. But Emily was starting to feel it. She'd stopped calling my dad Grandpa altogether by the time she turned 8. Started calling him Mr. Givens like her teacher at school. I don't know where she picked it up, but I didn't correct her. Neither did he. Then came the question. It was a Thursday evening, late after her bath. Her hair smelled like lavender shampoo, and she was coloring quietly on the living room rug while I folded laundry. She didn't look up when she asked, "Mom, why doesn't Grandpa like me?" I froze, socks in hand. "What makes you say that?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "He talks to Olivia and Noah. He gives the plum. He never talks to me." I swallowed hard. My instinct was to defend him, to lie soft and smooth. He's just tired. He doesn't mean it that way, but I couldn't do it. Not anymore. Not when it was hurting her like it used to hurt me. So I said the only thing I could. Sometimes people don't know how to be kind, even when they should. She looked up at me then, eyes too old for her little face. I try really hard though. My heart cracked right down the middle. "I know, baby," I whispered, pulling her into my lap. "You're the easiest person in the world to love. Never forget that." She nodded, but I knew it would stick. It always sticks that first time you realize someone you want to love you doesn't. That night, I cried in the laundry room, not because my father had hurt me again, but because now he was hurting her too. And I had let him. It was supposed to be just a quick drop-off. My cousin Rachel was graduating, and the whole family was gathering for a backyard lunch, complete with folding chairs, deviled eggs, and congratulatory speeches that always lasted too long. I told myself we'd stay for an hour. Maybe 2. Just enough for the photos, the polite smiles, the slice of cake. Then I'd make an excuse and take the kids home. But life has a way of unraveling when you're just trying to hold it together. Emily spilled lemonade on the tablecloth. Ben knocked over a potted plant. I cleaned it all up, apologizing with every breath, while the other parents chuckled and sipped wine coolers, their children sitting stiffly and tucked in polos, like they'd been born house-trained. Then my father called me over. He was standing by the grill again, the same place he always seemed to retreat to, when he needed distance but still wanted control. The sun was behind him, so I had to squint to see his face. Or maybe that was on purpose. "You have a minute?" he asked, not looking at me. I nodded. He gestured toward the side yard, away from the tables. I followed, careful to keep my posture straight like it might shield me. He didn't waste time. "I want to talk about the kids." My throat tightened. "What about them?" His jaw worked the way it did when he was trying not to say something too harsh, but never quite managed. "This isn't working, Natalie." I didn't answer, just waited. He continued. "You come around with them expecting everyone to pretend like this is normal, like this is what family looks like." My hands went cold. "It is family," I said quietly but firm. He scoffed. "You had them out of wedlock, with a man who vanished before either one was born. You dropped everything you were raised to be for what this?" He gestured vaguely toward the party like my kids were stains on the celebration. "You walked away from decency, from tradition, From everything your mother and I taught you. Then he said it. We raised you better than this. I stared at him, mouth open, but nothing came out. It wasn't just judgment anymore. It was condemnation, a verdict. And I stood there not as his daughter, but as his disappointment carved in flesh. I didn't cry, not in front of him. I just nodded once and walked away, back toward the folding chairs, toward my children. I held Ben's sticky hand and whispered in Emily's ear, "It's time to go." And for the first time, I didn't promise we'd be back. Because I knew we wouldn't. I didn't slam the door. There was no shouting, no luggage flung down the front steps, no dramatic final words, just silence. And a woman who had finally reached the edge of what she was willing to absorb. That night after the graduation party, I tucked the kids into their beds in the guest room, the same room my mother once used to store wrapping paper and emergency casserole dishes. Emily curled into a ball under the floral comforter, still clutching the sketch pad she never went anywhere without. Ben was out cold thumb in mouth arms, wrapped around a beat-up stuffed dinosaur. I stood in the hallway for a long time watching them sleep. The light from the cracked door fell across their faces like moonlight, soft and uneven. Then I turned toward the master bedroom. My parents were still awake. I could hear murmurs behind the door, voices low and muffled. Maybe they were rehashing the day. Maybe they were talking about me. I didn't lean in. I didn't need to hear it. I walked back into the kitchen instead, opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window past the backyard where it all started, where Emily had once tried to sit beside her grandfather and been gently told she didn't belong. The weight of every ignored moment, every averted eye, every lukewarm holiday greeting, every memory where we weren't invited. Every time I'd convinced myself they don't mean it that way. It all landed on my chest like wet concrete, and suddenly I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I packed the bags in silence. I folded the kids' clothes, zipped them shut, and set their shoes by the door. I gathered their sketch pads, their snack wrappers, their travel pillows. Then I grabbed my keys and texted a rideshare. I didn't want to risk my father waking up and offering one last look that might undo me. When the car pulled into the driveway, I gently woke the kids, told them we were going home. Emily didn't ask why. She just nodded and slipped her hand into mine. Ben yawned and muttered something about dinosaurs. We rode away in the dark, headlights slicing through the Kentucky night. No one chased us, no one called, and as we crossed the city line, Emily leaned against my arm and whispered, "Are we bad, Mom?" I blinked hard, throat tight. "No, sweetheart," I said. "We're just in the wrong story." I thought leaving would feel louder, but it didn't. It felt clean, like slipping out of a dress that never fit right to begin with. We moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the east side of Lexington, peeling porch paint, mismatched tiles, but no judgment in the walls. The landlord didn't care about my past, only that the check cleared. It was the first place in years that felt like it belonged to us, even if it groaned every time the furnace kicked on. I picked up hours wherever I could. Weekday shifts at a downtown coffee shop, weekend assistant at a children's art center. I graded coloring sheets, wiped paint off sticky fingers, and learned how to stretch a single rotisserie chicken into 3 meals. We didn't have much, but we had mornings. Emily learned how to braid her own hair. Ben started every day with a question. "Are we still free?" And I'd always answer yes, even when the car broke down, even when I had to choose between gas and groceries. There were nights I'd cry into the bathroom sink, the water running to mask the sound. I'd stare into the mirror and wonder if I'd ruined their lives just by trying to protect them. But in the mornings, they'd jump on the bed and ask for pancakes. And that was enough. I stopped going to family events, stopped replying to group messages that were never really meant for me. No one came looking. No one asked where we'd gone. We just disappeared. I started painting again late at night after the kids fell asleep, not for galleries or commissions, just to remember what it felt like to create without permission. My hands found their rhythm. Abstract colors, wild shapes, freedom on canvas. Then one day at the center, a little girl watched me paint during a quiet moment and whispered, "Can you teach me?" That single question lit something in me I thought I'd buried. By the end of that year, I'd started offering weekend art classes to kids like mine. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who didn't get birthday cards from grandparents. Word spread, parents came. Donations trickled in. We moved the sessions into a community library, then a shared studio space. I called it the Brave Room because that's what it took to show up, especially when no one clapped. We still didn't have much, but we had music in the mornings, crayons in kitchen drawers, laughter that didn't ask for approval, and peace. So much peace. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need reconciliation. I just needed my kids to know, in every meal, every bedtime story, every paint-smeared art afternoon, that they were wanted, that they belonged, and no one, not even my father, could take that from us again. It started with 5 kids and a pile of donated supplies, old tempera paints, dried up markers. I spent hours reviving easels with legs that didn't quite lock. We met in the back of a Methodist church on Saturdays after the food pantry closed. I'd sweep up crumbs, stack folding chairs, and clear space for imagination to bloom. They came shy at first, children who didn't speak much, children who had been told, "Quiet down, more than you matter." Some were like Emily and Ben. Others came from foster home shelters or worn-out apartments with paper-thin walls. But when their brushes touched canvas, something happened. Noise became color, hurt became shape, and slowly, week after week, those children began to take up space. But so did I. Word spread faster than I expected. Local parents started sharing stories. My son asks every week if it's Brave Room Day. My daughter smiled for the first time in a month. I applied for a community arts grant on a whim. Didn't expect much. But 2 months later, a letter arrived, $10,000 to expand our program. I cried right there on the porch. Ben holding my hand. Emily asking if we could finally buy real brushes. So we did. We bought paint sketchbooks, snacks. I built a little website. Created a logo with stars and scribbles. By the time we moved into a small storefront downtown, there were 30 kids enrolled. I hired another teacher. We held our first student showcase. People from all over Lexington came. Local reporters, librarians, even the mayor's assistant. One article titled it, "A Mother's Quiet Revolution, How One Woman Rebuilt Community with a Box of Crayons." I didn't recognize the woman in the headline at first. But then I looked at the photo, me in paint-stained jeans smiling beside 24 kids who looked like joy in motion, and I realized that was me now, not the daughter, not the disappointment, just someone who stopped asking for a seat at the table and built her own. And best of all, Emily stopped calling herself the kid no one wanted. She called herself an artist. It was a Tuesday morning when the message came. I had just finished wiping down the big paint table at the Brave Room blue and green. Fingerprints smeared like confetti across the edge when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Kentucky area code. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, a voicemail appeared. I pressed play with one hand while tossing used paper towels into the bin. Hi, Natalie. This is Rachel from the family. We saw the article about your art center. It's really something. Grandpa saw it too. He wanted to talk. I froze. The mop handle slipped from my hand and clattered against the floor. For a full minute, I didn't move. My hands still smelled like tempera paint and lemon soap. I could hear Emily in the background of the studio, laughing with the younger kids as she helped hang their newest wall of wonders. Her laughter used to be rare. Now it was part of the building's heartbeat. And they just now noticed. 3 years of silence. 3 years of birthdays, skipped holidays, ignored no texts, no cards, not even a Merry Christmas. Now they'd seen a newspaper article, and suddenly I existed again. Later that afternoon, a manila envelope arrived at the studio. No return address. Inside was a folded letter in my father's handwriting, sharp, precise, like he wrote it with a ruler in his mind. Natalie, I didn't understand what you were doing before. I still don't fully, but I read what that reporter said, and I looked at the pictures. You built something that matters. I'd like to see it for myself, if you'll allow it, Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement of Emily or Ben. Just the quiet arrogance of someone used to being let back in without knocking. I didn't respond. Not that week. Not the one after. Because I finally understood something too. Recognition given after you've proven yourself is not love. It's possession trying to reattach itself to what it lost. And I was no longer available for that.